Planning your career in aviation is no easy feat. Whether you're just starting your flight training journey or already a commercial pilot and dreaming of flying for an airline, we're going to discuss it all. All that and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Standby star 9000, 1013, Kilo 25. Coordinating aileron and rudder, bank, balance, bank pressure rolling to 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. Runway 29,
G'day and welcome to episode 86 of the Flight Training Australia podcast, the podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. I'm your host, Trent Robinson. Thank you for joining me. Well, I have some very exciting news to kick things off. Firstly, thank you to all you legends out there listening. Thanks to you, I have just ticked over 100,000 downloads. So, yep, the Flight Training Australia podcast is going strong, growing listeners from all around the globe. I'm often asked about some stats for the podcast, so here you go. Whilst Australia is obviously the most listeners, we're joined by aviators from over 100 countries. We've got 118 countries listening at the moment, if you can even believe that, with the top 10 being Australia, United States, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Germany, Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore, Spain, and Japan. So hello to everyone, all my international listeners and Australian listeners alike. It's so fantastic to have you on board. Top episodes are probably episode 1. I guess it's been out the longest, but no doubt there's been an IFR theme. Episodes 1 and 2, all about the IFR and proficiency checks. Wanting to learn how to fly, coming in at 3rd place. 4th is applying for your first job in aviation. Episode 6, remember that one because that will lead into what we're going to be talking about the next 3 episodes. And then episode 69, which is the Flying Down Under interview where I interviewed 6 Aussie aviators all about their careers. That's the number 5 top episode. And I have had requests for more of those, and I am working on that as well. So stay tuned. And finally, thanks to all the listeners. The top 27 listeners are my Patreon subscribers. So all my patrons, thank you so much for your ongoing support, be it a one-off donation or a monthly subscription. Thank you guys. You mean the world to me. All right, but that's not all. There's some more exciting news. On Thursday, I received my Part 141 certificate, which is just fantastic. So I am now officially a flying school. Trent Robinson Aviation is up and running. Very cool. I'm the second to go through the process and the first to apply for everything. So it was a good learning opportunity for CASA as well, just to see how this whole sole instructor 141 certificate was going to work. And they were fantastic to work with, I have to say. And I am up and running. So, yeah, I just still can't really believe it. It's very exciting. I always thought of being a flying school one day, and here we are. So that's all in place. I guess it's going to be a bit of a learning journey as far as how it's all going to work, because obviously I'm one person. I'll have RPL right through to CPL, instrument instructor training, but the main focus will be on the latter, doing check-in training, services, testing, instrument instructor training. I will take on other stuff as opportunity presents and as it fits, but we'll see how it goes. But it's a true privilege, and I cannot wait to get stuck in, develop my own course materials, and just give the best possible training I can up here in Darwin or wherever I go to come and see you. All right. So speaking of the best training, the last week you would have hopefully seen in my Instagram story, and if you didn't, why aren't you subscribed? Go do that right now. All right. But I asked a few questions about job seeking and flight training and the like. And if you didn't see them, go pause the podcast now. Go on. Open up Instagram, Facebook, and follow me. All right. So now you're going to get all the good stuff. All right. You back? Cool. All right. So this is a response to questions I've been getting both online, and I've also just been monitoring the sort of questions that are being asked on a lot of the online forums. And, things like training choices, dealing with employers, should I do this sort of training or that sort of training, and buy an aeroplane and all this sort of stuff. So I decided to do, what I'm intending to be a 3-part series, but having prepared today's one, I could almost split this one into two in itself, but we'll see how we go. But I'm going to try and cover it all. So 3 to 4 or 5, well, let's say up to 5 episodes. There we go. So firstly, all about planning your career, including all your training, applying for your career, and managing your career, and then discussing everything in between. So there's going to be some controversy, maybe. Um, not everyone is necessarily going to agree with everything, but hey, this is my podcast, and I think I've got a pretty good, grounded, rounded view on the things and well researched. But more importantly, it's going to have a lot of great information, accessing everything I know and all the information I've gathered by speaking with many in the industry. I'm in touch with chief pilots, heads of operations from all levels quite regularly. And this is just information that you guys cannot access regularly, routinely. And you're not going to get told by flight schools, not through any malicious reasons, because they don't know either. All right. So I'm going to try and pass on as much of that to you as possible to help you plan your journey and make it as smooth as possible. Now, quick disclaimer, I will be as honest as I can without bad mouthing anyone and give you the best information I can. But at the end of the day, you need to make decisions that make the most sense to you and your personal circumstances. All right, so part 1 of several, planning your career. All right, so when it comes to planning your career in aviation, one of the first crucial decisions that you'll face is selecting the right flight training options. Now, the aviation industry offers various training pathways, and choosing the one that suits your goals and circumstances is essential. So let's firstly discuss initial training and then choices and options post-qualification and when you should do follow-on training. So flight schools are obviously the popular choice for many aspiring pilots. And when I say flight schools, that goes without saying. You've got to go somewhere that teaches flying. What I'm talking about is your typical aero club or standalone flying school. All right. So they offer fast track programs that can get you on your way part-time, full-time, casually. It'll be a non-integrated training program, most likely. And this will be able to suit your budget as well as the time that you have available. Now, you complete it quickly or as long as you like. Obviously, I recommend a flight a week at least. But for more depth info, I suggest listening to episode 4, where I go all about learning to fly. So I'm not going to go into all the raw basics here, but episode 4 contains all that sort of information. But when choosing a flight school, you want to look for a reputable school through word of mouth, recommendations or online reviews preferably, with experienced instructors and modern aircraft to ensure you receive quality training. Now, let's discuss experienced instructors again, and then I'll get into modern aircraft. I have discussed this topic before and the difficulty of finding experienced instructors. So typically you're going to train with a grade 3 or grade 2, and this is just how it is. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this as long as A, they have been well trained by an experienced instructor, not an instructor who's just become a training instructor and has very little real world experience, right? And B, they are well supervised and have access to experienced instructors for guidance. So this will aid you in several ways. It'll give you options to upgrade or change your instructors as your training progresses, move on. And also, you'll get to fly with those experienced instructors periodically throughout your training for check flights and the like. All right. So make sure you get those options and just ask to fly with the senior instructor every now and then. Don't let the flying school dictate when that happens, if possible. Again, it's not always. People want to fly with me and I'm just not available, and that's life as well. But if you ask the question, I'll try and make that happen, and I'm sure others will as well. Now, the choice of training provider is a difficult one, especially when it comes to fleet choice. All right. So normally you will get what you're given. Whatever airplanes they've got out the back are the options you've got. But sometimes if you're lucky enough to have a choice of training providers nearby, you can bring what fleet they operate into it. Now, aviation has been going on for a while now, some 200 odd years. However, aircraft development and production has been on and off. This means we're left with 50-year-old airplanes, 20-year-old, and finally, less than 5 years old aircraft. All right. So there's a mix out there. These then have analog instruments, your classic SICK pack, glass cockpits, computer screens like G1000 and the like, or a mix of old and new, where they've got some analog and things like G5s or Garmin 275s or digital displays that fit into the spots, Aspen, all that sort of stuff. So flight schools will typically have older aircraft, maybe with some avionics upgrades, which does help keep costs down generally. And university programs will tend to have higher student outputs so they can afford more recent, newer airplanes, which are a lot more expensive to purchase and potentially operate. It just depends. And these will typically have glass cockpits like Diamonds and Cessnas and the like. So what do I recommend you do? Well, if at all possible, a mixture of both. It's no secret that glass cockpit aircraft most closely represent the airline cockpit environment. So knowledge of how these systems works, things like TAS and TORs, autopilot logic, flight management systems, functions, altitude alerts, all the bells and whistles, GPS use, all that is fantastic and has served me very well. The thing is, my experience of late is that anyone coming out of schools that operate these aircraft have not had the opportunity to learn about these systems. And I just don't get that. They're not being taught. I've been flying, our Baron has altitude alerts and all that, and no one calls out the altitude alert, 1,000 feet to go, 200 feet to go, and all the other things it does. Coming from a glass cockpit G1000 aircraft, those are part and parcel of operating those aircraft. There's all these bells and alerts and things that are there for a reason, and they should always be acknowledged, not just ignored. The problem is these aircraft are being used because they're new and available and they look fantastic and they suit a purpose, but they come with all this extra stuff which is almost unwanted. Because you can't use GPS and autopilot as a student, can you? Well, not according to some schools. And I find this bizarre. I have literally been witness to a school ordering G1000 172s and trying to work out how to take out the GPS. It's 2023, people. Right? We have to embrace technology and train in how to use it. Accessing technology without training is potentially dangerous. How many of you have actually read the manuals for the equipment installed in your aircraft? Right? I've flown with people that are using G5s and still don't know the full potential of what it's doing or how it works or why it's doing what it is doing. Proficiency check, 61385. You should know all about the systems and equipment you're using in that airplane. All right. So as I have indicated previously, some schools, and I mean this with all due respect, are glass cockpit one aircraft type wonders, which for a business model works great. It's all the same type. It suits the entire syllabus, keeps parts simple, maintenance programs manageable and all that. But for a student, it is detrimental to their growth and development as a pilot. So if this is you, try and fly something different, either within the school environment that you've got, if not as soon as you get out, or extracurricularly outside of the training environment, if you can. All right. I know this all costs extra money, but you need to try and do that. All right. Find something, get a hold of as many different types of aircraft as practical to broaden your knowledge and your aircraft skills or your handling skills. All right. So sadly, as a result, students graduating from some of the best, or reputedly some of the best schools in Australia, are now being tainted with a do not touch brush at no fault of their own, and employers up here and across Australia are now highly inclined to skip hiring them, as just too many of their predecessors have struggled in the charter pilot role. That's a big statement, all right, but it's sadly true, and I am seeing it personally. This is not just innuendo and rumor, all right, and no doubt an unintended outcome of such fleet choices. They are fantastic aircraft. I've flown them myself. I've used them myself, but everything in moderation, I guess, is the motto. All right. So maybe this concept needs a review because we're not producing as instructors the product we should be on a whole. I am, but some aren't. All right. So we need to work out a way to do that. And we're not going to solve that right now. So let's move on. All right, so other training options. So we've got flight schools, just your generic sort of Aero Club style. All right, then we've got integrated programs. So remember, there's non-integrated 200-hour syllabus and integrated 150-hour syllabus. And integrated programs provide a more structured and comprehensive approach. These programs combine flight training with the academic coursework, so you're doing all your exams and ground school intermixed with the flying. Each school has the option of doing this differently, though, mind you. So just be aware. Some might do the ground school at the beginning, others will do it back and forward. So RPL, PPL theory, do some flying, CPL theory, do some CPL flying, so on and so forth. All right. So you'll need to look at the individual school and see how they structure their course and see if that's something that you like. The other benefit of this is it will be conducted in a set time frame. All right, so this obviously has benefits of allowing you to budget, plan your life, as well as knowing roughly when you're going to get it all done. And the good part, going to get a job and earning an income from your investment in yourself. And it is an investment in yourself, right? You're gaining a qualification, which you're going to heavily rely on to get your first job. All right, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. All right, so the third option is a university aviation program, which offer a more academically orientated route, providing a broader understanding of aviation, general knowledge alongside the flight training. Now, some have partnerships with charter companies or airlines, and this provides networking opportunities and potential pathways upon graduation, right? So, for example, QantasLink take from a lot of the university groups to get into the Qantas group. And obviously from there, you've got the option of moving into mainline later on down the track once you've got some time under your belt. They do, however, take longer to complete, usually around 3 years of time frame. There has in the past been the view that airlines like higher learning because it demonstrates your ability to study and learn and commit to a course of training. However, this is no longer the case. All right, with airlines at the moment putting a lot greater focus on qualified pilots with the right number of hours and even type ratings. These are the things that are going to earn you the most points. Typically, maths, English, all that sort of stuff needed to be the case. It's not. If you've got a pilot's license, you've demonstrated the ability to learn and handle the academics involved. So that is generally all that is needed. Now, funding any one of these three programs, I have also discussed in episode 4. And there are pros and cons to both. But getting a loan, be it a personal one, a vet fee help, mum and dad, uncle, auntie, it's always going to add a cost with interest, but not just in finance. All right. Some of these courses are inflated by admin charges. And look, necessarily so. It takes a lot of upkeep to maintain and meet the requirements to offer these courses. But the flying component, some of it can be almost twice as much. I've spoken to people that have spent upwards of $150,000, $170,000 for what would cost you 70 or 80 at other flying schools. So with all the uni fees and extra everything else, are you getting extra bang for buck? I'm going to have to leave that up to you. I've done no research on that. I've flown with people who have graduated from those programs and have been good pilots. You're really going to have to talk to people and decide. But if you're doing it because you think you need a degree, you're better off doing a degree in something else so that you are skilling yourself in an alternative career pathway that if you were to not be successful in aviation, lose your medical, or just, things take a turn for the worst, you'll have other employment opportunities down the track, because having an aviation degree and being trained in aviation with nothing else to do, it's kind of putting eggs all in one basket. Not saying that's a bad idea. So many of us have done that and it's worked out just fine, but it is a consideration. All right, so once underway, you need to be involved in your flight training and ensure it's going to plan as best you can, which means you need to know the syllabus and where you are in it. And apart from obvious delays like weather and maintenance, things outside of your control, know how you're tracking and if you're on target. Study hard. You're there to do a job. Get your training done. Party later. Seriously. If you think it's all just going to fall in your lap and you're just going to get a license at the end of it, it's not how this works. This isn't an attendance report and you get a certificate for showing up. You have to meet the standard. And it's not just that. You have to be able to fly an aeroplane well, right? You can get 100% in all your exams, but if you can't fly an aeroplane, you're completely useless as an employee and a pilot. And flying is somewhat unique to other learning courses where the structure is more academic, whereas flying is both academic and practical. All right. You've got to be able to do the practical. You've got to be able to handle the aircraft. And as I was talking about earlier, adapt to new aircraft types and new airspace and new flying environments. If you're going to struggle with that, maybe you need to reconsider things a bit. I have seen very smart, intelligent, capable graduates being dumbfounded and disappointed that they just struggle. All right. So this is leading to extra line training or just outright failure to complete the training and then end up jobless. This is not an outcome you would expect after spending over $100,000 on pilot training, but it is what we are starting to see. And this is a new thing. This is not something that we've seen before. All right, so whether it's a victim of sausage factory pushing out students, getting everyone through, dropping standards as flight examiners and instructors, these are things that we need to look at. All right, so how can we make some of this training a little bit better to stop doing this? And this is more for the instructors listening. Scenario-based training is what is desperately needed to help CPL training. And if you're an instructor who has become an instructor straight from your training, your natural tendency is to base what you do off the training you received. All right. If you need some ideas of what actually goes on in the real world, feel free to touch base and reach out, and I'll be only too happy to help you out. Scenario-based training is realistic scenarios on what a typical Part 135 charter pilot is going to experience and have to do day to day. And we can incorporate this into the commercial training. Rather than just flying around within 100, 150 miles of the departure airport, flying over the same terrain, over the same towns, over the same airports, and I get it, some places are limited on what's available, but there are ways around this. For example, why not link 2 or 3 lessons together? It's still keeping everything completely within the syllabus. And just remember, if you do, as an instructor, modify anything in the syllabus, you need to get head of operations approval first. But link 2 or 3 lessons together and make a day trip out of it. This will then open you up to 200-300 miles, going to airports you haven't been to before, refueling of aircraft, different terrain, landscapes, airspace, all of this stuff. All right. And you can set up a scenario. Give your student weight and balance calculations to do. They have to carry a certain amount of fuel to make the flight happen. They've got passengers to pick up, some simulated freight. Make it all realistic, but raise all sorts of situations. I would tell my students that I've got a bunch of, or I've got a 50-kilo package to pick up. So they go, yep, no worries. They'll chuck that in the baggage locker. And then I literally would walk up with a 2-meter long box, which of course won't fit in the airplane. Okay, just something simple like that to make them realize that, hang on, there's some questions I need to ask. What are the dimensions of the box? Is it dangerous goods? All that sort of stuff, all right? All the things that you're going to see in commercial flying. All right, so if you can do that, that will just make such a massive difference. It makes the training fun, makes it valid and applicable, and you'll learn something yourself as well. Okay, so enough doom and gloom. I only mention this stuff because these are the things that we are seeing, and there's a chance or an opportunity to correct this and change it. All right. So if you're a student, just be aware. Mention something to your instructor. Make yourself aware. Don't say, hey, Trent said. But just make sure that the training you're getting is the best training you can receive and be proactive in it. All right. But once you finish your CPL, what's next? Instrument rating, instructor rating, go jump in a caravan and get a gas turbine engine endorsement. These are the questions I keep getting asked. Or do I just go for it and start driving? Well, firstly, can you afford to do anything more? All right. If not, well, then start driving. Get in the car. Where do I drive to? All right. Well, this is all going to be in the next episode. But as I mentioned previously, if you are going to start job seeking and looking, you've got to have some money in the bank. $3,000 to $5,000 minimum. You're going to have to pay rent. You're going to have to buy food and fuel. All these things cost money, and it's going to take you time to sell yourself and land a job. Despite what's going on at the moment, it's very favorable for pilot jobs, but it can still take some time. Remember, I'm not sitting there wondering who I'm going to employ today. I might do it in a week's time, 3 weeks' time, right? You don't know the time frame of each employer. So you've got to be able to sit it out until such time as you do get something. But more on that next episode. Right. So for those who have money, further training, people ask me, instrument or instructor? And the answer is, are you a people person? If you are, then instructing is a fantastic career and a great starting point. All right. It can be either. And I can tell you now, the industry needs good instructors. Episode 10 has all the details for you about instructor rating. I'm not going to go into it all now. However, I have been banging on all episode about flying with someone with experience. How do you get that if you start teaching straight out of flight school? And that is an excellent question. And I go into this episode as well, but in short, it's difficult. In today's structure, or the way companies are structured, unless you happen to work for a company that has a flight school and a Part 135 operation attached, it makes it really, really difficult. Right? In the military, in the airlines, or even in charter companies, the check-in trainers are the pilots who have been doing the job for some time, got further training themselves, and have experience. Unfortunately, GA is back to front. It's the other way around. You don't normally go do charter, then do instructing, and then get an airline job, unfortunately. That's ideally how it should be. Go out in the field, get some experience, bring it back in and share it with your students. We don't do that. All right. So do your best, get whatever jobs you can get. If you're going to be an instructor, well, have a think about the scenario-based training I was talking about before. Have a think about how else can you expand your knowledge and the exposure. I like I've said before, I've met people who bought airplanes and I got to ferry them. Right. Then I was flying all across the country, different airports, different airspace, different aircraft types. Just as I said earlier, get as much experience and exposure as you can as an instructor, as well as a student graduate, right? Doesn't matter. The more experience you can get, the better you're going to be at your job. All right. So what about instrument ratings? Well, pros and cons. We'll complete the training, but not use it for a year or two. That's just pretty much fact. All right. It will teach you sound skills though, which you can utilize if disciplined in your VFR flying. And I say disciplined because there's no one there to hold your hand and make you do it. This is going to come down to you. And it is easier to get done when you're unemployed rather than trying to get leave and have the pressure of getting it done in that leave in a tight time frame. So it is a little bit tricky, all right? But at the end of the day, it's not going to kill you and it won't hurt you if you don't do it straight away. It's always there to be done at some point. So it's not a crucial decision to make. If things are tight, get out there, get a job. I wouldn't bother with other endorsements like caravan, gas turbine engine endorsements, etc., unless you are specifically targeting a job like skydiving, for example. It's just another qualification that you'll get and not use and then have to get current again. All right, sure, it might help you down the track that you might end up with an operator, and because that's going to save them money having to teach you, it might work in your favor, but I wouldn't worry about it right now. Do that later. Okay, so a fair bit of info to digest there, and I was being fairly brief and in summary form on everything. There is so much detail to go into, and everyone's pathway is different and unique. But hopefully this gives you a good idea on where to start, either modify or aim for your journey in aviation. Next episode, part 2, first jobs out of flight school, job seeking, interviewing, what to expect and how to better prepare for it all. All right, so that's it for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. Keep the feedback coming. I was having a look on Apple Podcasts the other day. Some great feedback there. Thank you, everyone that's taken the time to leave that for me. Remember, if you've got any questions based on today's episode or anything else, any topics you want me to cover, you can email me at info@trentrobinsonaviation.com.au. All the details are in the episode description below. share it with your friends, let them all know about it. There's all sorts of information here that could help them out as well. And I very much look forward to seeing you next week. I'm off to flight training myself into the Mallard Ground School tomorrow. So very much looking forward to that. I'll report back on that next Monday. And until then, blue skies, and remember the golden rule. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.